So as much as life is difficult in a country that is not my own, I'm going to find a way to make it work, even if it means selling on the street.
Meet Nicky Verd, a global speaker and the author of Disrupt Yourself or Be Disrupted. In this episode, Nicky walks us through her resilient journey from selling on the street to being on the stage of Tedx. Nicky's story is truly inspiring.
Is this the right way to live? I felt like a foreigner in my own skin, in my own body, in my own house, in my own everything.
You still go through this imposter syndrome. Oh, am I good enough to write this book? How did you overcome that?
Every human being has a book in them. You can decide to take yours to your grave, or you can decide to give it to the world.
I want to go back. If I was a fly on the wall in your childhood home, growing up in Cameroon, what would I have heard and noticed?
Oh my God. I don't know. I don't think I had so many dreams as a child. I think I just grew up in an environment where it was more survival, just looking to survive. Going to the farms, not like the fancy stuff you have in Stellenbosch farming, of course, but as a child, growing up with my grandmom, it wasn't much, honestly, anything to do with dreams. It was more of survival, and that was pretty much it. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you grew up with your gran.
Yes.
What was she telling you?
Oh my God, growing grandma. I was the weak physically of her grandchildren. The rest were like more physically stronger than me. And she would always tell me stuff like, if you don't toughen up, how are you ever going to function in society? Because again, the society she knew was a society to go to the farm, you dig things, and you have to be physically strong to really get things done. And she could see as a grandma that I was not coping in that environment. So physically, I was very weak. And yeah, those are some of the things that to this day, I still remember her telling me to toughen up. Not emotionally or mentally or anything like that, but just to toughen up in terms of having physical strength to go to the farms, to carry firewood, carry water. We used to fetch water from the stream, and by the time I'm getting home, I'm like, and normally she will throw those things around, and we will laugh over it. But also at some point, I was like, but how am I going to survive being the weak one in the family? But nonetheless, I think that now when I look back, I know that strength comes in so many different shapes and forms, but because we grew up in a place where the hustle was more about farming and being physically strong, have your ability to dig up a hole and plant things and harvest things, that was what strength was about in the village, so to say, or back in my childhood. But as I grow up, I realized there's so many levels to strength, which I have other strengths. To this day, I'm still not physically strong.
Yeah, we're definitely going to unpack those other strengths that you're referring to. And, I understand that there's the French part and that there's the English part of Cameroon, and you were brought up in the English part.
Right.
Was it a bit more developed on the English side, or was it more or less, regardless of where you were, French or English, was it more or less the same conditions and opportunities?
Not really. In terms of development, it's pretty much the same. Actually, the French side maybe is a little on the higher end. But with the English side, the opportunities are limited because the English side is a smaller side. We are the minority in the country. And so when you start seeking opportunities outside that zone of the English side, it becomes very limiting if you cannot speak French, especially for someone like me. I tell people that I feel like a foreigner in my own country because I don't speak French. When I was in school, French was more of optional, and I didn't see any need in learning French at the time. Again, when you are locked down in a particular small environment, you cannot think outside of that environment. So in my mind, I used to think like, I have no reason to ever go to the French section. I'm born here, I will die here, everything will be, I don't need to learn French. At least that's how I thought. And so it limited me from learning the French. But then when it comes to opportunities back home, it's a struggle because you have to be able to integrate between the French and the English. And now when you are able to speak both languages, you actually have an advantage because meaning you can function in the French zone and you can function in the English zone. But when you're limited with just one, it becomes really, really difficult. Even as much as the French is the majority, there are lots of people within the French side that can say even one word in English. And then there are also a lot of us that really struggle with the French. And like recently when I was back home, I went to the supermarket and I struggled to shop. I was like, oh my God, this is not happening. All the foods are labeled in French. So I have to read things by the color and okay, like, this is rice, this is rice, right? But if it's written in French, I just get so lost, which is one of the things that frustrate me, about my own country. We are supposed to be a bilingual country, right? And it's just two languages that are mainly official, which is the French and the English. So you would expect that things will be labeled in French and in English. They're not many languages. We're not asking for more. But in the English side, everything is labeled in English. On the French side, everything is labeled in French. And then when I traveled to Dubai, I sort of immediately saw the difference in how things are labeled because it's Arabic and it's English. Especially as the UAE is very much multicultural, there's so many people from different nations in the UAE, right? So when you get to a supermarket, you immediately see things in English, things in Arabic. So if you cannot speak Arabic, you can still fully function in Dubai, right? In a place like Dubai. And I picked that up comparing it to the frustration I feel in my own country because once I get into a supermarket in the French-speaking areas, everything is in French.
I can see how, limiting it can be, and of course frustrating if you grew up on an English side.
Yeah.
And, fast forward a bit coming to South Africa, I mean, just reading about your journey, I was very surprised. And also it was super inspiring. I think that's the one word that stuck out for me. It was like how inspiring your journey is. And I just want to unpack that a bit. And coming to South Africa, of course, for and with your partner at the time, as well as education purposes. What did you want to do back then and be back then? And what was your mentality as a young 20-year-old in South Africa?
Back then, I think before I got married, now I'm divorced, but before I got married, the dream was to go to university. But then because my parents passed on when I was still very small, for one, I never saw my dad, but then my mom was the one who raised us up. And I had dreams to go to the university. And then my mom passed on when I was still about 13 or 14. So my life sort of took a different turn. I started living with uncles and aunties and all of that. But my brother, whom today for me is like the father I never had, he really took responsibility of me in terms of making sure that I had school fees to go. Paid my school fees and I had things to go to school. As much as I was staying with different people, my brother made sure that I had the basic things I needed to go to school. Because one thing my brother decided was that I am not going back to the village after our mom passed on. Like, you see the village, like, because I left the village at some point and came to a smaller town, not the big town, but the smaller town where I was living with my brother and my mom. And so my brother decided I'm not going back to the village. Otherwise, I would have been a farmer in some lost village back home with no electricity, and everything. But so going to school, in high school, from like secondary school to high school, my brother was taking care of all of that, right? And the dream for me was to go to the university. But at some point, he himself being a child, still needing a parent and having to parent me, it was not easy for him to actually give me the life I wanted, which was one of the big things I wanted for me to go to the university. And it broke me. I was like, oh my God, I have no future. There's no way. Like, I have nothing. And he didn't explain much, It's not like he will sit you down and explain, this is why you can't go. But now that I'm an adult and I can look back, I'm like, this guy himself needed a parent, But now I understood that there was no means financially for him to do that. But nonetheless, when I did not go to the university, I felt like life was over for me. I had no opportunities because, again, it's a society that we're told you go to school, you get these certificates, you come out, you get a job. So for me, I was like, what else is there for me to do? And then I got married, I guess. So yeah, I 22, found somewhere, and I was like, okay, this is it. I guess this is my life. So I got married and then moved to South Africa because he was based here. But still, I always wanted to still go to school in a way. After having my son, I decided to enroll at UNISA, which is an online. So I didn't have to
University,
go. Yes, everything was online. But I did not graduate, by the way. So I started at some point, and then I really didn't finish what I was doing. But the dream was to always do marketing, something along the lines of marketing or finance or some of those things. But it was between marketing and finance. But then again, I love people. I love interacting with people. So I thought marketing would give me access to interact more with people. But none of those dreams came to pass academically, as I can say. And then the divorce happened, and then life took a completely different turn again. But at the time then, I was working, even though, I did not have the qualifications I wanted to have. But I was working as a personal assistant in a hospital for a doctor.
And before getting into that, quick one. Over the past year, we've been sharing stories of impactful individuals across the continent, and this channel has been growing thanks to each and every one of you tuning in every week to watch these videos. But we have noticed that more than 70% of you who watch this content are not subscribed. So please hit that subscribe button, and I promise to bring you the stories of more impactful individuals across this continent. A question I had was, coming to South Africa as an African and experiencing discrimination, xenophobic attacks. I mean, me myself, I came to Stellenbosch in 2014, which is a predominantly very white and Afrikaans town. And back then there was a transition for the university to be more English. And so more English speaking people came here. But it was tough as a person of color being, in a predominantly white town. But I can't imagine being from another African country, plus being a Black female. How did you react to all those?
Oh, that's really an interesting question. No one has ever really asked me that. And now that you're asking about it, it's funny to say because South Africa is an African country, right? It's really funny to say what I'm about to say. But I knew I was Black when I came to South Africa. So, because in Cameroon, yes, there are a few white people here and there, but the whole race thing was not a thing we grew up hearing. It's not a conversation that happens anywhere. It's not in the media. It's not in classrooms. It's not anywhere. You just know yourself, you are a human being. And then I'm in South Africa and suddenly I'm realizing, oh, I'm Black. What does that even mean? I don't know. Because now, the conversations in the media, everything changes. Like it jumps on you. When someone describes you, they describe you as a Black woman. I'm like, okay. So it was some sort of a culture shock. I would put it that way, right? So that was one of the first culture shock that for me, it took a while to actually settle in. Like I have to refer to myself as a Black person. Maybe so much because this is Africa, this is South Africa, but it's one of the early things for me that I struggle with mentally, to have to refer to myself as a Black woman or a Black person.
Whereas in Cameroon, it would be I'm English speaking or I'm French speaking,
which is different. It's the mind responds to that differently. It wasn't the thing of I'm Black or I'm white, but here for the first time I'm realizing that I'm actually a Black person.
So do you think that here it was more based on what you looked like on the outside, whereas in Cameroon it was more
on the language?
Yes. And kind of where you came from.
Yeah. It was more of the language thing, and just here is the color of your skin, so something along those lines. Yeah.
Got you. Yeah, I think dealing with any sort of discrimination can be really tough.
And I don't even think in terms of me realizing I was Black had to do with discrimination. It was just the fact that it was difficult for me to actually respond and like, I'm black. Like if someone were to ask you, or if a conversation came up, or if you're feeling a form and there's a portion where you have to say, are you black,
Yeah,
white?
yeah.
And you have to go feel black. Like I've never seen things like that in Cameroon, right? So it wasn't even like it was discrimination. It was just a realization that I was not exposed to at all. And now I'm suddenly realizing, oh, I'm black. Okay, cool.
Let's call that obstacle number 1.
Right.
Obstacle number 2, going into the separation.
Right.
I also read that it was a very abusive relationship.
Yeah.
Many people still face that in this country, continent, in globally, right? Gender crime. How did you have the courage to get out?
Oh my God, when you are in a bad marriage, you have to choose between your sanity and keeping the peace, so to say. I wouldn't really put it like there was abuse, but it was not on the extreme end of it. It was more on two people that should not even live in the same neighborhood that got up, ended up getting married. I'll put it that way, right? In terms of our value systems and the way we saw life, our mindsets, it was completely the opposite of each other. And so for me, dealing with someone that had such a different value system from mine, it was difficult, right? It was difficult. It's something that I've never really talked about it. But when you're going down that rabbit hole of very much abusive, mine was not like that. But on the other hand, if I were to unpack everything that happened, some people would think I'm reciting a movie script. But it's so weird, the things I experienced in my marriage, right? But I would choose not to go down that rabbit hole. However, when it happened for me, I had to ask myself questions like, is this the right way to live? I felt like a foreigner in my own skin, in my own body, in my own house, in my own everything, And also the whole idea of if you're married, you need you need to feel supported. You need to feel like you are with someone. For me, the entire responsibility was on me and it was on my shoulders. I remember telling the person who brought me up, who is like a mom to me, because my parents are of late, that I was leaving, and she asked me, "Do you know what it feels like to be a single mom out there? Whatever is going on, please, you guys sort it out." And I told her I've been a single mom all along. And she understood what I meant. That statement alone, because from the time my mom passed on, she raised me. She was like, "What? Why didn't you say anything?" Like, we are taught to make it work when you get married. So you zip it up and you try to make it work. So when I started unpacking certain things to her, she understood what I meant by I'd been a single mom all along. I was like, if I could survive as a single mom, doing everything I do here, I think I can survive outside. Being a single mom, which I have.
Obstacle number 3. Yeah. You were full-time employed.
Yes.
And one day you get the call from your boss to come in, and he sits you down and says, "Sorry, we have to let you go." What was going through your mind at that point? And, how did you react to that?
Oh my God, that's one of the big obstacles also that I've had to go through in my life, because the layoff or the retrenchment happened exactly 1 year after my divorce. I finally decided, you know what, I'm going to find a way to survive or make life happen on my own. And suddenly the job that I was holding on to, hoping that it would help sustain me and my kids, it's gone. So it was literally 1 year. I'm still trying to make sense of this whole thing that my life has just turned out. I'm now a single mom, even though I've always been a single mom. But now officially everyone knows that she's a single mom. And suddenly the job is gone. So when my boss called me in for that meeting, one, I didn't see the retrenchment coming, because my boss used to tell me plans like 5 years ahead of time, like, we'll do this in 5 years. This is what I'm seeing that we can do. And that sort of helped me or put me in a relaxed mood. Like, oh, Nicky, you're good. I mean, if this man is telling you things to do in 5 years, then you're good. And even at that time, I had plans to maybe still go back to school, always still doing this whole mental thing of, I need to get the degree, I think for me it was the whole idea of, I just need the degree. I don't even know what it was for, but I just need it. I need it. So I got laid off at that place also where I needed the degree, and I was planning to go get it. And I did not have a plan B when the whole job came crashing down. And the pain I felt was so intense that immediately some people would go looking for a new job. But for some reason, I was like, no, I'm not going to apply for any jobs. And my mom, the one who brought me up after my parents passed on, she keeps calling and asking, are you applying? Are you applying? And I'll keep telling her, yeah. And I'm not applying for anything. I'm processing this whole thing in my head. I'm like, it's like when they say when you're bitten by a snake, you run away from anything that's crawling, even a worm. So it was like, I have to go through this pain once again. I don't want to. But then at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what else can I do? I think I can figure something out. At the time, I went on to just selling things on the street to survive on the streets of Joburg. I don't know if you ever been to Joburg CBD. I used to like just be on the street and selling things to survive. But at the back of my mind, I knew that there was something more I could do. But as whatever that something more was, I did not have a definition for what it was at the time. But I was very curious after I got laid off. I was very curious about one thing. How do organizations continue to thrive when they let go so many people? Because I've shared the story so many times, and I always give an example of, when you buy a car, you start seeing that particular mark of car everywhere. For me, because I've been retrenched, news about retrenchment consistently jumped on me. So even as I was on the street, struggling to make ends meet, at the back of my mind, I wanted to answer that question. So many people are being laid off, so many people are being retrenched. How are organizations coping? So I throw myself on the internet, and I remember really typing the question, how organizations continue to thrive when they let go so many people? And that question led me to the belly of the internet. And for the first time, concepts like artificial intelligence, robotics jumped on me. Processes that used to be done by humans are now being done by machines. This was back in 2017. Now we know everything happening, like it's even on a bigger scale, right? But even back then, I was fascinated by the whole idea that a software can do a work of a human being. I was fascinated by the whole idea that there's something called artificial intelligence. It's like, there's artificial intelligence? That's interesting. So I just dug myself into the rabbit hole of wanting to understand this more. And the more I was researching on this, the more fascinated I became about it. And I started writing about it on social media. And at some point, I thought to myself, I think someone should write a book about this. But I didn't think that someone would be me, right? Also, I'm still on the street. But then on the street, I'm hearing people, like I would randomly ask people, like, how long you've been here? Someone would be like, I've been here for 5 years. I've been here for 10 years. I remember a guy telling me he's sold on the street for 15 years. I'm like, 15 years?
And tell me about this experience. I'm very curious. So what is your overall experience from one, being able to humble yourself so that now you're actually selling products on the street, and then two, the other people there, like
you have kids. These people have to eat. These human beings, they get up in the morning, they're hungry. And as a parent, it is your responsibility to make sure that you put food on the table. So for me, that was my biggest motivation. Like these children have to eat. To backtrack a little bit, when my marriage ended, my family wanted me to send the kids back home because they understood we are in a foreign country. How would you survive with 2 kids on your own? And I also said no. Because I mentioned earlier, I grew up with my grandma.
Yeah.
I wanted a relationship with my mother so much that it immediately dawned on me, if I send my kids back home, I'm doing the same thing that I felt was done to me as a child. So as much as life is difficult in a country that is not my own, I'm going to find a way to make it work, even if it means selling on the street. So my kids being separated from me, which is what I know that my family did not mean, it didn't come from a bad place. It was the best way they knew how to support me. Send the kids home and restart your life. At least by yourself, you can restart your life. And the answer was no. And this happened year in, year out. Like the conversation kept happening to the point where they felt like, she's very stubborn, let's leave her. Like, because I would not buy into that
Of
idea
course.
because one, I knew the hunger I used to have for my mom or for my parents in general while growing up with grandma. Like, oh my God, why can't I just live with my mom? You know, she was in a different city and I was in the village. So I didn't want my daughter going through the same cycle of wondering, why can't she live with her mom? Where is her mom? Or what does it feel like to just be with your mom? I grew up in that type of a cycle and I did not want to repeat it intentionally so. So I didn't care what anyone thought about me being on the street. I just wanted something that would ensure me and my kids were together and there was no separation happening. So I think for me, that was one of the big things. And I've never really been someone who cares too much about what people think, even though it affects you mentally. But at the end of the day, you ask yourself, will these people pay the bills for you? Will these people take care of your needs? You know, yeah, their thoughts matter. At the end of the day, I'm a human being. It bothers me. But I do it even with that anxiety, even with that at the back of my mind, like what are they going to think? And it brought some sort of a rift between me and the family that I insist on not sending the kids home. Even to this day, there's still conversation around me sending the kids home. And I was like, they are too young. I can't separate from the kids, you know. I think it's some sort of childhood trauma when you've gone through certain things and you don't want your kid to go through. So yeah, I could not see myself sending my kids home. It would have been the best option. And I think that some many young women would have taken that option to be free from that responsibility of having to take care of two kids by themselves. But for me, I just couldn't. It was no, I just couldn't see myself doing
And
it.
of course, from the kids' point of view, there's already trauma that they're experiencing from a separation. And now there's, of course, more trauma because their mom is under financial stress.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, there's, how did you ensure that the environment was still safe for them? And then I think a follow-up question to that would be, how do you practice like undoing that trauma in this
right
where you are now?
To be honest, I've done my best as a parent, but I know it's not good enough because there are certain things that, as much as I was trying to protect them from being completely separated from me, I'm sure they're still going through some sort of a trauma being in that environment where things were never enough. Food was never enough. We are always on the verge of being thrown out of where we were staying because the rent is not paid on time. And they could see that and they could feel that. And to an extent, yeah, I don't know if there's anyone who can really have a perfect childhood. I tried, but I don't think my kids, I would say, they had a perfect childhood. I mean, they're 16 and 12 now. But nonetheless, I'm happy that I did not put them through a place where they would feel abandoned. I'm sure they will have different types of traumas to deal with, but definitely not abandonment, which was one of the big things for me in my case. Of course, like I said, I'm not a perfect parent. I failed my kids in different areas, but one thing I was sure was to protect them from that feeling that they were abandoned by their parents. Again, remember, separated from their dad, they are fully with me, and then sending them to Cameroon. It's not like I can go see them on a weekend. This is 6 hours flight away, so I couldn't just do that. There was a time where I was living on food parcels from our church. Now, I'm a Christian. You get excited to go to church to pray, but on a Sunday, I'm getting excited because I know at least I'll come back home with a package. That is rock bottom, right? And I'm doing all of these things while writing the book. And I left the streets at some point, town where I was selling, because now when you are in town, you get up in the morning, you go set up your stand and put your stuff, you be there the whole day, come back home, you're so tired. I had to figure out a way where I could sell some of the accessories I was selling in town. I had to figure out a way where I could sell them on the internet so that I buy myself more time to focus on doing research for the book and writing. And I'm so glad that I had that idea because now I went on YouTube and I learned a few things I could do here and there, especially when it had to do with accessories, ladies' things, not this type of earrings, but more of beaded African earrings. Okay. And I learned how to do some of those things. And I set up a Facebook page I learned to knit them through watching YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Thank God for YouTube. Oh God. So I learned a whole lot about doing that from YouTube, and I set up a page on Instagram and on Facebook, and I will advertise what I was doing, put them out there, and then someone would order, and then I will at home design them myself, and then send them through
Deliver.
courier services.
Wow.
Yes.
This is super impressive, because I just want to unpack that mentality there.
Yeah.
Because you realize that by the time it takes to go to town,
Yeah.
set up your stall, sell, pack up, go back
Yeah.
home, you still have, of course, other responsibilities
Yeah.
with your kids. Plus, you still were writing at the time and doing your research. You realize that there's a more efficient way to do this.
Yeah.
Which is impressive. And I don't think people think that way. They think that, oh, because I have to work 8 hours and then I get X amount in return. You know, how did you develop that mentality?
It's just when you have your back against the wall, you are looking at how to make the most of what you have. I think that's where I was at the time. How do I still not completely die of hunger, but not also completely abort the whole idea of writing a book? Because I wanted to do this, and I needed time to be able to do that, right? So the best solution for me at the time was, okay, I have a little bit of knowledge about social media. I've seen people put up pages and sell things online. I can try that. And somehow it worked. Not like much money was coming in from there. Listen, I used to live on 100 Rand a week.
Wow.
This is things that blow people's minds when I talk about it. To this day, I don't even know how much I spend per day today. I mean, just coming here, how much it cost me to come here. But I used to live on 100 Rand per week. Okay. Cabbage, you know cabbage?
Yeah.
Yes, you buy a big one for like 10, 15 rands. That is already, you cook it and you last with pap, right, for a few days. Because how do you live 100 Rand a week? I used to. You have to find a way to make it work. We used to eat chicken feet. Chicken feet, some people love it in a different way. Today is Heritage Day, so it's more of like a traditional kind of thing. But for us, it was like the cheapest thing we could get. I remember a time where I was invited for a birthday, and I took my daughter. We walked into that room. You know when they set up birthday things on the table? Yeah. There's chicken, there's beef, there's drumsticks, there's cakes. My daughter walked into that room, saw it, and she literally screamed, "Mommy, meat!" And I had to put my hand on her mouth. I understood exactly. This child has not seen meat in such a long time. And she cannot believe that it actually exists in a place like, I was like, "Hey, sweetie, don't shout, okay?" But no one else understood around. They just think it's a kid excited about birthday. But me as a parent, I understood exactly where my child was coming from to see so much meat being set up on a table. That was our life really back then. And to this day, my daughter has this habit of using a tea bag and feeling uncomfortable to throw it away. Because back then, we used to use one tea bag at least 3 or 4 times. We use it, put it in the water. Quickly, we take it out, wrap it back. So to this day, I still have to remind her, it's okay, sweetie, you can throw it in the bin. That was our way of surviving through those difficult times.
Seeing that as a parent, I'm sure that, that's just an added level of fuel.
Yeah.
That's, added to your internal fire.
It makes you work extra hard. I have a friend, a very good friend, one of my oldest friends, and he is based in Pretoria. When you hear this, you will know I'm talking about him. And he will always ask me, "Nicky, we were together. We started this thing together. What is it about you that makes you so pushful?" Like he would tell me, "I wish I had the grit you had." I'm like, "Listen, how much do you get from the government at the end of the month, especially during COVID, right?" I was like, "Hey, I know it's little money, 350, and we'll have these conversations." And I'm like, "You can afford to sit back because your government can send you 350. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
You can afford to relax because you know the worst come to the worst, your government will come to your rescue. I can't. I am aware that I'm in a country that is not my own. My motivation is different. I am aware that my children don't have any grant. My motivation is different. I am aware that the government is not going to come save me. Not even my own government. This country could burn down to the ground. My country is not sending any flag to come and pick us from here. All right? So we are aware of that. As when you live in a foreign nation, the motivation is different. It's on a different level. I don't think I would be as pushful, maybe, if I was back home. I really don't think that, because there's just something different when you are fighting for survival and you are outside your comfort zone, so to say. Because in my case, being back home would be more for a comfort zone. If I didn't have food, I would likely call my brother or call his wife or go to my auntie's house. Or, I would call someone. But here, you're on your own.
Even with this, now you're in probably number 5 or 6 obstacle. And even with all these obstacles, and you have this idea for writing a book, you still go through this imposter syndrome. Oh, am I good enough to write this book?
Yeah.
And you come up with hundreds of excuses for why you shouldn't. How did you overcome that?
I had a huge imposter syndrome. I still do to this day. I don't think imposter syndrome ever leaves the room. Recently, I had a conversation with someone who was saying that, they're struggling with imposter syndrome. I said, I was like, hey, I have a roommate. Now, what do you mean? I said, my roommate occupies a bigger space and his name is imposter syndrome. I was like, listen, it's annoying, but one way to look at it is that imposter syndrome doesn't share space where there's no greatness. If you don't have a dream, you're not attacked by imposter syndrome. If you don't have an ambition to be anything, you're not attacked by imposter syndrome. So for me, the moment you start feeling those imposter syndrome feelings is an indication that you're onto something. And anyway, I know it better now, but back then, with the whole imposter syndrome now, I'm thinking, can I really write a book? And the answer is no. No way. No to the no. Like, forget it, not me. Again, remember my whole obsession with degree impacted me mentally, because now I never really got the degree I wanted. I just wanted a degree. I never really got it. And now, how can I write a book without a degree? I'm not an academician by any stretch of imagination. How dare do I think I can write a book? All right, these are the conversations I'm sitting and telling myself. Number 2, the book that seems I need to write has to talk about technology. And I don't have any knowledge or any background in tech. Everything that I know up to this point, that I even feel I can write a book, I've learned it on my own. I've learned it by research, I've learned it Google, YouTube content, podcast. I've just been learning these things on my own, and now I'm feeling a need to write a book. Do I really qualify to write this book? No. Yes, I said no, right. And I gave it up for so long, over a year of saying this, no, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing this. But nonetheless, that idea would not leave me to write the book. Let me backtrack a bit. When I got divorced, the huge imposter syndrome was also part of that. Like, you're a divorced woman, who's going to listen to you?
There's a different label.
Yes, there is a different label that comes to that. And I remember going online, oh, thank God for Google, and typing women who have survived divorce or something along those lines, or women whose life was changed by divorce, or women whose life was impacted. I just wanted to know that there was a woman out there who had gone through divorce and yet made something of themselves. That was the desire. All right, because I needed to break through that thing in my mind that I'm a divorced woman and no one is going to pay any attention to me. No one is going to listen to anything I had to say. Those are some of the mental barriers, right? And again, my computer become my best friend, where I have to type in all questions on Google, right? I don't even go discussing with a friend, this is what I'm thinking. But I type those questions. I went through a list of women online, but one woman stood out for me. Um, Sarah Jakes, the daughter of the preacher T.D. Jakes. And that was the first time I
Oh,
actually
wow.
knew that T.D. Jakes had a daughter. I never knew. I'd listened to him before,
Mhm.
but I've never really known that the man had a daughter named Sarah Jakes. And I started listening, right? I started reading her story online and following. Not only is she divorced, but she got pregnant at such an early age. I was like, oh wow, how did she overcome all of this? So she became my motivation or my inspiration that something can come of you, even though you've made 1, 2, 3 mistakes in your life or certain things do not work out in your life. So I read her story and read her story and read her story, and I immersed myself in her stories. I will listen to her on a daily. I don't listen to her as much as I used to. But she literally saved me from my own mental blocks, right? Listening to someone like this. And her own case must have been much different and much deeper impact on her because she's a daughter of a preacher. I mean, you're supposed to be perfect. You're never supposed to be human. You're supposed to be an angel. That's what people expect of you, right? And I'm sitting here now thinking, oh, wow. If she could have, and she had remarried at that time, if she could overcome this, I can overcome this as well. That was a mental block, right? Now, so I'm overcoming that part of the mental block. And that is why when I speak to people today, I was at Nedbank just before coming to Cape Town, where I gave a talk. And I was saying that some people are just a Google search away from the problems that keep them up at night. You just need to Google it. You will come up with, there's a solution to your problem that will come up. So I have Googled so many things that have brought me solutions, right? And one of them, again, was about the organization thriving without humans, so to say. And then it was about women who have experienced divorce and they made something of themselves. I got to walk through that by reading their stories, particularly Sarah Jakes. And now when it came to writing, for me to write a book, knowing that I am not an academician by any stretch of imagination, even though I had a passion to do this thing, and I don't have the degrees, I don't have the tech background, that was another mental block to overcome, right? And I remember still searching on the internet. Who are the type of people that write books? I want to know what type of people write books. Can anybody just write a book? I mean, really? Can anybody just write a book? And I came across a 2-hour masterclass. In this age and time, we would call it a masterclass, but it was a workshop held on book writing by Miles Monroe. He's late today. I mean, he's of late. But I listened to that whole 2-hour thing, was talking about book writing, and he said something. He said, every human being has a book in them. You can decide to take yours to your grave, or you can decide to give it to the world. You don't need qualifications to write a book. You don't need to be a celebrity to write a book. You don't need to be any of these things to write a book because every human being has a unique journey, a unique story, a unique experience. And some of these experiences, people put them in books. That was the breakthrough I needed. So listening to him, I was like, I think I can do this. But I'm still not very convinced. I went to a friend. And I asked him, hey, do you think I can write a book? He looked, I don't even think he can remember that I actually came to him with this question. He looked at me like, of course, you can write a book. You're such a smart woman. Like, really? Like, yeah, you can write a book. So this is me in my way to overcome all these mental blocks, right? No, it's a long answer to the question you asked, how did I overcome those mental blocks? But I had to narrate them so that people see, you cannot just sit and wish them away. You cannot just sit and hope that one day you get up and feel better about this. You have to find a way to overcome those mental blocks. And for me, it was an intentional journey to actually fight those mental blocks. 1, oh, you're a divorced woman, you're useless. Number 2, you don't have a degree, you're even more useless. Number 3, you don't have any background technology, you are even more useless, right? So these are things that I had to go out there and find a way to overcome those mental blocks. And once I felt like they were a bit out of the way, I dived into writing the book.
Yeah. It's overwhelming when you first start because essentially now you have no tech background, you have no academic background, and you're literally just YouTubing and learning about AI, big data, IoT, all these big terms. how do you still ensure that it doesn't become overwhelming, and you just take it one step at a time and upskill yourself and educate yourself so that you could write about it?
Yeah, you just answered the question on my behalf. I took it one step at a time.
Okay.
I was upskilling myself as I go along. When there's a new trend, I will go deeper and learn what is this new trend about. Okay, now OpenAI is throwing this whole chat GPT thing around. Okay, what is all of this? And then the new models that are coming up, GPT-1, GPT-2, GPT-3, GPT-4, all of these things. Now I have to just one step at a time. Okay, well, let me understand. What is this new model about? What does it do? What can it do? And now there's different AIs that are coming up. How do they differ from each other, right? So it is a constant learning process. And again, I tell people that not having a degree for me is an advantage because I cannot afford to relax. I cannot afford to sit back. Some people with a degree, it can actually make them complacent. But I cannot afford that because I know the market is changing so fast. If I do not keep up with the new trends and the new things that are happening within the industry, okay, I can easily become obsolete.
It also feels like an individual has to have that security in themselves and not attached with what they do. Because I think that becomes a problem. Because when you get questioned and you don't know something, it feels like a personal attack. But in actual fact,
I have felt so many of those at different times of my journey. But again, you remind yourself you're human. You're not an expert in the industry. You're still learning as it goes. You're learning as it evolves. And you're disrupting yourself as it goes. Sometimes I get reminded by my own people around me, like, hey, Nicky, you need to disrupt your own self. Remember the title of your book? When I feel like I'm getting stuck and I'm talking to someone, sometimes it's annoying when they throw that back at me, like, hey, I guess it's time for you to disrupt yourself. Be like, come on, God, like, can't I just be human for a bit? But then it helps me. It's a constant reminder that this is a journey. You never arrive. You consistently on that journey and consistently evolving and changing, making mistakes along the way and rising.
I think that's such a key point.
Yeah.
You started off by just posting things that were interesting to you.
Absolutely.
And hopefully it's interesting to one or two other people. Like that was all that you were doing.
Yeah.
You weren't thinking of this big thing of I want to get to 1 million followers.
No, no, no.
Okay.
By the way, I don't have 1 million followers before someone thinks I have 1 million followers.
Not yet.
Not yet. I hope to get there one day. But however, when it started, it was just an interest. It was just for me to have a place where I put my thoughts out there. And for me, it evolved from social media to me starting my website where I wanted to be writing articles because I felt like social media was limiting. So I could have a website with my own thoughts where I could control what I put there. So I started my website back then, long before I ever wrote the book, long before the book ever came out. So when the book actually, when I finally got to the place of publishing the book, it sort of felt like the people who were following me or the audience was already ready for me in a way.
It's all right. And it almost seems as if you already put your book out there.
Yeah.
Now you just
exactly. Yeah.
Got you.
I actually remember at some point thinking, but who's going to write this book? I mean, who's going to read this book? Everything I've written in this book, I've actually shared it. It's already out there. I actually felt that. But nonetheless, the fact that I built that platform worked hugely in my advantage. It worked hugely. So if anyone is struggling and they're not even yet sure what their interests are, write anything. By the time you have clarity, you will have had an audience that will evolve with you.
Definitely. Yeah. I think also the key is that it comes from the inside. It's inside out as opposed to outside.
Absolutely. Yes, it has to be from the inside. Because today I get people asking me questions that I'm actually struggle to answer them. Things like, oh, Nicky, how did you write a book? Number one, I didn't know I was writing a book. And that's like the honest answer to that. Now I'm writing the second one. Yes, I'm aware that I'm writing a book now. But back then I did not know I was writing a book. I was just writing things on social media. I was just writing articles, not even thinking anything would come of it, right? So things like, oh, Nicky, how do you get to have these speaking opportunities or corporate gigs or things like that? And again, the truth is that I put myself out there. So when people go looking for who is a speaker, somehow I come up because I've put myself out there. And that's the beauty of making the making the internet know that you exist.
Leverage.
Yeah.
Mm.
Let the internet know that someone exists like you. Because once people are searching for something online, and that's the power of the website, right? Then your name comes up.
Corporates and large businesses, what are you telling them to remain innovative and, of course, prevent disruption from
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah, I don't think anyone can prevent disruption. It will happen nonetheless. My message is more on the people side, that we should not leave people behind. Because I think that corporates, when it comes to the technology, of course, they have the resources, they have the best technologies. So it's really about, more on my part, it's really about the people. How do we make sure we bring the people along? How do we make sure that people are open-minded and willing to embrace the digital transformation that is happening within organizations, right? Because an organization can come in with the best tech, but if the people had not been prepared mentally, they may find a lot of resistance, which leads to failure of implementing digital transformation because the people are not part of the process. So I'm really more not necessarily on the technology or the innovation side of things, but more on the people side.
Adaption.
Yes, mentally, adopting a digital mindset, embracing the change that is happening, learning to explore and use AI tools. Some companies are using Copilot, for their employees. Many, I think they prefer that one. Some employees are still like, oh, I don't want to use this thing. But if you don't use it, you're going to be left behind. Or the colleague who is using it is going to replace you.
How do you help individuals get over that fear of, I'm too old, this is not for me, it's for the young people?
Yeah.
All these excuses that these individuals make. Could be millennials, it could be older than millennials.
Yeah, it runs across the board. It's not just a thing for old people, but just many people in general still have this mindset that technology belongs to the IT department or the IT guys or people who went to universities to study IT. So my mission is to bridge the gap between people and technology. And I put it this way: there's technology innovation happening on one side, right? And the people are on the other end, almost like looking at it from like, hey, okay, what's going on there? But if these innovations are happening and the market is changing and the people are not aligning themselves with where the market is going, then there's already a mismatch. Because when we talk of technology or disruption, what people are hearing is most people are thinking only in terms of new business models that come into the marketplace and disrupt the marketplace. For example, let's take Uber, for example, that comes into the marketplace, disrupted the taxi industry. Let's take Airbnb, for example, that disrupted the hospitality industry, right? Those are like new business models that people are familiar with. And they're thinking, okay, that is what disruption is all about. And that's true. That's what disruption is all about. But people need to also be disruptive. People need to also be disrupting themselves. Because if these new business models are coming into the marketplace and are disrupting the marketplace, recently I was giving an example of even Apple. Apple is known for iPhones and a MacBook. But today, Apple is in the financial services. You think of Apple Pay, Apple Card, So these are different disruptions and different new models that are coming into the marketplace. So if people, you and I within this market, if we are not thinking disruption and how do you evolve as a person, how do you change as a person now, what are the new skills that makes you relevant, for example, right? Because if the market is changing, it means consumer demands are changing. It means the way things are done within the market is changing. If you're coming from skills that were relevant from 10 years ago, it's not a match. It's not the right fit. So you have to ask yourself, in what ways can I align myself? If people are now more comfortable in punching their phones and the taxis by the door, how do I align myself with that? What new skills do I need to learn, right? So for me, it's really more about people because honestly, there's so many people that feel like this is not for me. Young, old, it runs across all the demographics. So it's the mindset. It's really about the mindset. This is not just for the tech guys, it's for everyone. And in fact, I tell people if you have a smartphone, you're a tech person. Speaking of CEOs, I was just sharing something recently. I say one of the big trends we're seeing today is that every CEO is now a tech CEO, whether you like it or not. Every industry is now a technology industry. Every employee, you're a tech person, not just for IT anymore, right? Because you look even in agriculture, there's technology transforming that industry. You look
Correct.
in manufacturing, there's technology transforming that industry. You look in finance, there's technology transforming that finance industry. And so if a CEO still have the mindset that this is for IT guys, or that there's something specifically called the tech industry, of course they will be left behind. Yes, we know that there's still the big tech guys, right? We know your Google, your Amazon, we know them. But every industry today is a tech industry in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so insightful. I think people don't think about it in that way.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you're not adopting tech in your business, then, or you as an individual employee are not adopting and leveraging tech,
Yeah.
the person next to you is going to.
Absolutely. And it's a mindset thing. If you can use technology tools, they can cut down your work.
Correct.
Why do you insist on taking a week to finish a project? You can partner with AI tools and finish it in a day or maybe in even a few hours. So it streamlined down the work. It 10x your productivity. Why insist on traditional models when you can use, artificial intelligence?
Do you know the 4 quadrants from Tim Ferriss? I think it was Tim Ferriss.
Yeah.
Automate, delegate, eliminate,
Yeah.
or the ones that you continue have to do.
Absolutely.
I think that, when I saw that framework, I'm like, I'm applying this everything in my life, not just business, but like gym, diet, food.
you're
Like
right.
it saves you time, and time is our most valuable asset.
Right.
And so I think, like you said, it's that mind shift of I need to view my time as valuable, and therefore, once I see that, I can put these things in place to then allow me to
Yeah.
do things quicker, or not do things at all.
Absolutely. I was listening to Warren Buffett and the other guy from Microsoft, Bill Gates, have a conversation. And for the first time, it dawned on me. I mean, the way he puts it, he said, of course, he's one of the richest people in the world, right? And he can buy anything he wants. So there's literally, there's nothing he wants that he can't buy because he didn't have money. So he literally can get anything he wants in the world. But one thing he can't get is time. He can't buy time, no matter how rich he is. He said he could become even a trillionaire. But one thing he will never be able to buy with his millions, billions, trillions is time. So what AI is helping us do is buy more time in a way.
Brilliant way to think about it.
Yeah. Helping us buy more time in a way, because a project that would take you 24 hours, with AI, you can literally do that project in less than 24 hours. So AI is helping us buy more time. But until people start thinking about it in that way and how to leverage these tools, they will just keep being afraid of it. But you can actually use it to create value for yourself.
Nikki, amazing. This was so good. This is the last part of the podcast. It's called the fast fire. Okay. So I'm going to ask you questions, and if you could answer in a word or a short sentence, that would be amazing. What's one thing you would say to young Nikki right now?
I would tell her there are different levels to strength, not just physical strength. I think I started by sharing some stories of what my grandma used to tell me. So I would tell my young self that, you may not be physically strong, but there are different strengths that you have, which I didn't know back at the time. So I used to think, I can't really make it in life because I'm not physically strong. So realizing that mental resilience is a strength, being skilled in other things is a strength, having a good mindset is a strength. So there are different strengths in life. I would tell her that.
Wise words. Fast forward, looking back to the Nikki that's in front of me, what would you say to her?
To keep dreaming and to keep believing and not allow what people think what people think of her to stop her, because let me unpack this a little bit. There's a tendency when you put yourself out there in chase of your dreams, people have different interpretations of what you're doing. And sometimes, if you're not careful, you can fall back to try and protect yourself from those interpretations. For example, one of the things that makes me really uncomfortable is when people say I'm a celebrity. Like, what? Since when? But did we change the definition of a celebrity? Like, can we go on Google now and Google South African celebrity or even African celebrity to see if my name comes up on any of those lists? So I would be like, let's go on Google and see if my name comes up with this whole thing about celebrity. But the downside of that is that I feel like if I don't put myself out there too much, then people will not make all these jokes about, hey, you celebrity this, right? It makes me, the pressure that comes from that, it makes me uncomfortable. But then on the other hand, I have to remind myself that the people making these comments, actually, they're not even the clients. They're not people who are going to do business with me. They're not the people who are going to pay me, right? But these comments, nonetheless, makes me very, very uncomfortable when you put yourself out there, expose yourself to the spotlight. And people have all of these ideas about you. And then suddenly they expect you to live a certain lifestyle. Like, oh, you're a celebrity and you're doing this. Oh, you're a celebrity. That is the pressure that I do not like. So nonetheless, I would tell myself, in spite of these celebrity expectations that people have of you, simply because you have, a bit of a following online, don't step back. I think that's what I would tell my current self. Don't step back, because there's a temptation to step back. I will please the friends that make those comments, but I will lose out on clients.
You reminded me of a Jay-Z quote. I'm not sure if you heard that. You probably did.
I know.
You know you're doing something well and right when you have haters.
That's interesting. I don't know if I have haters. No, I wouldn't call them haters.
I'm just calling them
haters. It's just expectations of, throwing these certain labels. For me, it's labels. They start labeling you in a way that you're not. And with that label come expectations. They want you to live a certain lifestyle, do certain things, go to certain places. Now they see you in town, they're like, celebrity, what are you doing in town? You get what I mean? Yeah. I don't want that level of pressure, but nonetheless, I have to consistently remind the current Nikki that these are not the clients. Remember, you're doing this, you're marketing yourself. Yeah. The reason I'm on this podcast is not for celebrity status, is because I'm putting myself out there. Yeah. Right. So yeah, it's a constant reminder that the people that makes me feel uncomfortable are not my clients.
Yeah. The way I see it is, whether you turn left or you turn right, people are still gonna talk.
Exactly.
So it's about, for me, it's blocking them out. What's your advice to those individuals that feel like they're at rock bottom?
Look up. I think it's there's this motivational speaker when he says, when you hit rock bottom, you have nowhere else than to look up because your back is on the ground. So you're looking up, right? I'll say look up, and there's power in hope. When you just believe that somehow you're going to get through this phase of your life. I think I had hope. I trusted in a higher power than myself. I'm a Christian. So I believe somehow God is not going to abandon me. I'm going to come out of this, even though it was dark. Like, oh my God, it was dark. But hope is powerful. Don't lose it. If you lose hope, you lose everything, really. Life is never really void of struggles. I'm not where I used to be, but it doesn't mean my life does not have struggles anymore. You just graduate from one to the next. But one thing you should never lose is hope. Whether you have your back against the wall, you are in that rock bottom. Yeah. Don't lose hope.
That's power. Yeah. Next steps, what can you share with us? Of course, the second book.
Oh yeah, I'm currently working on the second book. I love it, but it's also challenging because now I'm very conscious that I'm writing a book and it's difficult. I've been touching the book and abandoning for like the past 2 years, to be honest. I will start it, and then at some point, life gets in the way, and then I abandon it, and then I'll come back to it. And then when I'm coming back to it, it's completely a different title. Okay, I don't think the other title was fine. Let me try something else. So by the time, but I have plans to finish at least by the first half of next year. So hopefully now that I'm putting it out there will help me make sure I keep to my word.
Accountability.
Yes, will hold myself accountable for that. But yeah, I'm working on the next book. I think it's long overdue. It should have been out by now. But again, like I mentioned, life keeps getting in the way. Yeah.
Amazing, Nikki. Thank you. Thank you also for the impact that you're making with not just the work that you're putting out there, but by sharing your story. It's so inspiring, impactful, and even part of your story resonates with me. And I'm not a single Black woman, but what your struggles and your obstacles, it's many people were in or currently in your situation, and by you speaking, you're actually helping them, whether you know that or not. But thank you for the work that you're doing, and I'm looking forward to the second book. Yeah, thank you for also coming on.
Wow. Thank you so much for having me. Woof, this was amazing.